Hi BookTube, it's Amy. Let's look at a work by Holbrook Jackson today. Holbrook Jackson died in 1948, but this is the 1978 reprinting of his work, The Anatomy of Bibliomania, which is not a novel, not even a traditional nonfiction work. It's sort of a compendium almost. I'm not quite sure what to call it, but it is almost a commonplace book of various bits and pieces on book-related topics, on topics related to reading, related to bibliomania, and related to literature. And I've not read it in its entirety. It's been on my shelf for 5 or 6 years at this point. But it's something I've dipped into now and then. But I thought, for the purposes of this video, I might begin at the very beginning here. We have our title page here. As you can see, The Anatomy of Bibliomania. Partly inspired, I think, by the Anatomy of Melancholia. And I know once upon a time I did indeed read the introduction from the author to the reader that explains more about what this book is. But as I said, that was several years ago, and it's been my habit to pick at it, to dip into a section every now and then. So this is reprinted by Octagon Books in New York City. So that's the edition that we have here. It was originally published by Farr, Straus and Company in 1950. So after Holbrook's death in 1948. But we have a very generous table of contents here. The sections tend to be only a couple of pages long on different subjects. For instance, part 1 is titled "Of Books in General." And we're going to begin with some sections here on books and their most excellent qualities, the praise of books, a catalogue of fond similitudes, of book reverence, of biblianthropomorphism, microcosms that outlive monuments, and on to some more topics of their morphology and dimensions, the pleasure of books, the art of reading, of fellowship, of the reading of books, study and book learning, and on with various book-related subjects of book hunting later on. But the volume begins with a section titled "The Author to the Reader," and so I thought we would read that here today. And this is several pages long, so this might be the longest video in this series. We're looking at just about 15 pages here. And the font isn't very big, so it's going to take a little while to work through this. So we'll see how far we get today, whether we split this introduction into a couple different videos, or whether I just continue on here. But he begins by saying, "Gentle reader, I presume thou wilt be very inquisitive to know what antic or personate actor it is that so insolently intrudes upon this common theatre to the world's view, arrogating, as you will soon find, another man's style and method, whence he is, why he does it, and what he has to say. 'Tis a proper attitude, and the questions clear and reasonable in themselves, but I owe thee no answer, for if the contents please thee, 'tis well. If they be useful, 'tis an added value. If neither, pass on, nor in the observation of that wise Glanville hath any one need to complain, since no one is concerned about what another prints, farther than himself pleaseth, and since men have the liberty to read our books, or not, they should give us leave to write what we like or forbear, which for the most part they do. Yet in some sort to give thee satisfaction, which thou hast a right to demand, since I have caused my book to be printed and sold for money, I will show a reason both of this usurped title and style. And first, for the name and form, which I have so freely adapted from Robert Burton, his Anatomy of Melancholy, lest any man by reason of it should be deceived, expecting a Pasqual, a Scherzo, a burlesque, a satire, some humorous or fantastic treatise, as I myself should have done, recalling that all parodies are jests, I may at once undeceive him, for my intent is serious. I have gleaned the crops of innumerable authorities, scattered far and wide, winnowed the chaff from the grain, and setting out the various species in such an order that they may best contribute to our knowledge of books in general, and of Bibliomania in particular. But should my treatise be deemed to have missed its mark as a piece of science, I am content that it should have its niche as a pastiche, for then it cannot be other than an entertainment, an extravaganza, a revenu de livre, with all the stars in the cast, and a libretto sparkling with an infinite variety of wit and wisdom, sense and nonsense, in a prose and verse, epigram, aphorism, tale, apophthegm, anecdote, history, etc., sometimes authoritative, sometimes speculative, spiced with whims, paradoxes, fancies, facts, the whole tending towards a harmony which is mine own gift to this pageant of books for bookmen. Books and the man I sing. And since thou, gentle reader, art ad ungunum factus homo, a polished man of that bookish kind, for none but bookmen will understand, still less enjoy this assemblage, 'tis in part of thee. Thou thyself art the subject of my discourse, and I desire leave to inform you, that shall become my readers, that I write not these things unto you because you know them not, but because you know them. Quinquid agunt homines, votum timor ira voluptas, godia desuris nostrae fargo libelli est. And there's a footnote here that says Juvenal Satires 1:85 to 6. And I suppose that to be Latin, but I myself don't read Latin. But thankfully he has a translation for us below. So that Latin translates to, what bookmen do, vows, fear, and ire in sport, joy's wanderings are the sum of my report. Thus my title and form become plain, for this treatise is an anatomy of its subject, a fair analysis of books and their meanings for all kinds of men and women, with a particular relation of the madness engendered by them and for them, in those extreme cases which I have explicated. My first purpose was to expound only this last, but in doing so I have wandered many times from my main theme, in order that a true relation between sanity and dotage should be made clear. Wherein I now find that I have incorporated as much of the one matter as the other, so that if the center or core of my dissertation remains Bibliomania, its environs extend far beyond it as towns grow from a single citadel, institution, or workshop into a country, but remains towns. Examine the rest, therefore. Oops, as I'm knocking that over. That's what I get for trying to sit cross-legged on this couch and putting my foot to sleep and needing to move it. So let us continue on. Let's see, where were we at? We were talking about towns and citadels. As towns grow from a single citadel, institution, or workshop into a country, but remain towns. Examine the rest, therefore, in like sort, and you shall find a true picture of a book and all its relations and purposes, its joys, advantages, infirmities, and offenses. But in the meantime, how does Burton concern me, or upon what reference do I usurp his style? I confess indeed that to compare myself unto him for aught I have yet said were both impudency and arrogancy. I do not presume to make any parallel between my work and his, for what I have accomplished should be plain, even to the hurried passer-by, and if, posing myself deliberately as God posed him, I look awkward, ridiculous, strange, the fault is mine, not his, which is too evident to need proof. And since I must not be overconfident of my own performance after him, it will be prudence in me to be silent and let my treatise tell its own tale. Yet, I hope I may affirm, and without vanity or brag in any sort, that by acknowledging Burton my master, and by imitating him, I have excelled myself, and farther again, as I hope, without any suspicion of pride or self-conceit, that although I had not his advantage of a university life, as long almost, he saith, as Xenocrates in Athens, and ad sectum fere penned up most part of his study, ego in Arcadia vixi, I have yet lived a silent, solitary, private life, mihi musis, to myself and books in the busy world, for I have been brought up a student in the University of Affairs, the modern city, as he was in the most flourishing college of Europe. And we have a footnote here. The most flourishing college of Europe would refer to Christ Church in Oxford. When he found concentrated in those rich warehouses of wisdom the Bodleian and the library of his own college, I have found dispersed in many places, and if he can brag with Jovius almost, in Uluse domicili Vaticani totius orbis celebrimi, per 37 annos multa opportunac didisi, for 40 years. And more, I have had the use of good libraries as ever he had. And at all times I've had books of my own, with no memory even of a time when I was bookless. For I am from a book-loving tribe, and like Mr. Lear, I live in a beautiful parlor with hundreds of books on the wall. And we do have, I believe, that footnote number 2 just says prefet hist. So I'm assuming it's referring to a particular history written in Latin. Unfortunately, there is no direct translation for us here. So if you read Latin, I'm sorry if you still cannot understand what I attempted to read there. But as he said, like Mr. Lear, I live in a beautiful parlor with hundreds of books on the wall. And I have used my books, perchance, with even greater gusto than Burton used his, for whereas he was a student by condition, I have remained one by waging constant warfare with opposing circumstances, every studious hour of victory over the tyranny of business, and as my Augustium Collegium has been books and the world, I would be, therefore, as loth as he was in more concentrate and more learned amplitude, either by living as a trone to be an unprofitable or unworthy member of so diverse and operose a society, or to write in my hours of freedom that which should be any way dishonorable to such a momentous and manifold foundation. And if I am so bold as to claim this slender kinship with him, seeming thus to honor myself overmuch, I am not blind to the differences between us. I frankly confess I am a scholar without scholarship, pursuing learning without attaining it, and kin to him by inclination rather than achievement. In this light, my treatise of Bibliomania, insofar as it is Burton Redvidius, may be taken as an act of homage, which I offer to his memory, ab singulari amor, as well I may for constant companionship, since first I met with his anatomy nigh 40 years ago. Thus in general, but from another point of view, such a work in such a form is as much of me as his of him. Something I have done out of running wit, turbine raptus ingeni, product, as Burton confesses of himself, of an unconstant, unsettled mind, though in that both he and I are unjust to ourselves, si parva licet communere magnus, for inconstancy could never have sired his treatise or mine. Put case that we are observers, lookers on, transmitters of ideas, commentators of the passing show, not actors in it or playwrights. We create nothing, but allow everything to create a lively interest in the cosmos of ourselves, a curious courage before the convictions of others, not taking our own too seriously, but willing enough to tilt in a joust with those who throw down the gauge for the fun of it. Our patron saint is Democritus, as he frankly owned, and our final comment, a laugh. However, we may set it forth with words, and I see a parable in this story of Democritus, how he retired to Abdera, a town in Thrace, where he lived at last in a garden in the suburbs, wholly betaking himself to his studies and a private life, saving that sometimes he would walk down to the haven and laugh heartily at such variety of ridiculous objects which he there saw. Such a one was Robert Burton, and he emulated his master both in what he wrote and what he did, for he would walk down to Folly Bridge at Oxford to recreate himself with laughter at what he saw and heard, and I, in our own time, have abundant opportunity to recreate myself, or recreate rather, to recreate myself with laughter, while I taxi down to London Bridge or Piccadilly or the Strand, or such other notable gathering places of people as my greater freedom of movement affords me. For what is all this life but a kind of comedy, wherein men walk up and down in one another's disguises and act their respective parts, till the property man brings them back to the tiring house. But I am not always laughing, any more than they were, and I sometimes rail with Carlyle satirically, tax with Shaw, lament with Schopenhauer, sometimes again some petulanti cacino, and that translates, according to the footnote, to I am laughter with wanton spleen. I am laughter with wanton spleen. And then again, Jecker ure bilious, gall burns my liver. I am much moved to see the abuse which I cannot mend. Our artistry is thus in an attitude, and if, in the main, it is like to die with us, but this not certain it entertains us, and others perchance, while it lasts. I am not ignorant that I might, as one friend, a notable poet and stiff-necked critic of himself as well as others advised, have sorted out and coordinated my store of analecta on some plan more to the purpose of our own age, and indeed more particular to myself. It was sage advice, necessari qui se accommodat sapti. He is wise that suits himself to the time. And I was and am so much enamored of the tenet that each and every age should express itself in its own way, and not in that of the past, however excellent. For composition is not there, it is going to be there, and we are here. That I seriously gave my mind to the problem of recasting the whole business, but it fell out otherwise, for I then discovered that I should have known if I had given thought to the origin of my enterprise, that there is no modern method of literary mosaic. The art was perfected by Robert Burton, and he remains its unapproachable master. Many have larded their lean books with the fat of his masterpiece, but he has had no imitator till now, save Charles Lamb, in an experiment which was never meant to be more than a fragment. And our footnote says Lamb, curious fragments, miscellaneous prose. From this it may be argued still more stiffly that a literary form which has found no copiers in over 3 centuries must needs be outmoded, defunct, a washout. To this so spacious an objection I have this to answer, that it would have been such had it been no more than a patchwork, a show or pattern of words and phrases. But the anatomy of melancholy is far more than that, and as a great part of this discourse is grounded upon the anatomy, I hold myself obliged to a short account of that supposal. Robert Burton's ingenious treatise is a curiously wrought-out design. There are idle students and cavaliers who have advertised Burton as the creator of a peculiar anthologic maze, an amusing literary chaos, a fargo of quotations, a mere olla podrida of quaintness, a potpourri of pleasant delights, a florigelium of elegant extractions, a tangled fardel of old worded flowers of thought, a faggot of odd fancies, quips, facety, loosely tied, the creator, in short, of a book for a rainy day and a cozy corner. And I will not deny that he has made for the curious and more bookish of readers our greatest work in this kind. But particularly I say it was not his aim to be an entertainment, though he diligently sought to avoid being tedious. Burton wrote as a psychologist and a philosopher, inlaying to those ends his tesoro of borrowed apothegms and notions. He was so bold as to dispose himself scientifically without other authority or qualification and inclination. at the dawn of our era of deduction from observed phenomena, and although it was his disposition to admire and consider strange rather than common things, and to set too great a store upon the unfolding of learned and curious opinions, he sought to make his book as scientific as Dr. William Harvey made his De Motu Cordis, or Sir Isaac Newton his Principia, or the matters of that, and to come nearer home as Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species, and as philosophical as such notable works as our own time as Die Welt als Wille and Vorslang, or the Evolution Creatus. And if he knew no better than to mingle science with philosophy, as I erewhile began to say, it is all for our own good. For this dereliction of scientific duty he achieved wisdom without dullness, by means of which it comes to pass that his book survives in our affection as well as in our admiration. Yet, and here is an end of this business, for I am come at length to my point, he is a precursor, not so much of these exact works as of those of such conspicuous coordinators of anthropological ideas and phenomena as Keene and Fraser, Krafft-Ebing, Havelock Ellis. In these anticipations, I am much in concert with him, and were I equally sympathetic with their style, I should have preferred it to his. But since it was otherwise, and I more enamored of my Burton as a writer, and finding my subject of Bibliomania amenable to his method, with an affinity to its leisureliness and copious garrulity, I was therefore bold to imitate, to revive again, prosecute and finish in this treatise, and for reasons which become plain, if they are not so already, I found in the ample form and slow measure of his diction, which goes trippingly enough on occasion, a refuge from the dirt track of civilization, safe in the hallowed quiets of the past. A large, still book is a piece of quietness, succulent and nourishing in a noisy world, which I approach and imbibe with a sort of greedy enjoyment, as Marcel Proust, those rooms of his old home whose air was saturated with the bouquet of silence. From this enjoyment of so wide a calmness, I found an inclination to reproduce it, and proceeded more by instinct than design, as though sauntering into a domain of unexplored tranquillity, wherein I beheld the bright countenance of truth in the quiet and still air of delightful studies, and began, for gladness, to extend its bounds. This ancient manner, with its undulations and digressions, its dingles and coppices of verbiage, its elegant parterres of selected prose and verse, its sharp contrasts of grassy plots and arid places, is not, I am well aware, the fashion of these times, when all men hurry, and many torture us with noises which disrupt our thoughts and interrupt our lives. I have taken pains to make it slow and long against my custom, and the manner of it is often so tedious that it is apt to please only those who study to be quiet. But that may be accounted a prime virtue in these times. For the rest I keep in the common path, aiming at neither simplicity nor subtlety. I saunter along, loitering when and where I will, taking my time. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. There is no hurry. Haste not. Be at rest. This now is eternity. There is time to rest if we wish it. No good to be always rushing about. I like to do nothing, to escape from purpose, to brood, to think back and forth, to sit by a fire in winter or a garden in summer, to loaf on a sea beach with the sun on me, to hang over the wall of a pierhead watching the waves in their green and white tantrums, to sit in a brazier on a Parisian boulevard with a common book, and the people moving to and fro, to idle in parks or public squares, in the quadrangles and closes of colleges, or the inns of court, or the great cathedrals, to forget haste and effort in old empty churches, or drowsy taverns, to rest by a roadside hedge or in a churchyard where sheep browse, to lie in a punt in the green shade of the willows, to sit on a fence. These things please me well. A poor life this, if full of care. We have no time to stand and stare. So it is done, and it cannot be helped or amended. Make the best of it. I descend then to the second prejudice, which may have been formed in behalf of the objectors. You have had a reason for the manner. If any man accept against the matter, and will demand a reason of it, I can allege more than one. I writ of bibliomania by being busy to avoid bibliomania. There is no greater cause of bibliomania than bibliophilia, inordinately pursued, no better cure than steady or adventurous and eventful reading, and for some, writing to express and record such experiences. But of this I have discoursed elsewhere. Some have been afflicted with bibliomania through idleness, and for them there is small hope of cure. Others, and I count myself among them, have excess of affairs. Many, like asses that wear out their time for provender, are so buried in the minor and immediate tasks of earning a living as to get confounded promptly and permanently with the victims of commercial ambition, whence it comes to pass that slyly and insensibly perverted nerves frayed and brains dulled, they take to books as sick souls take to drugs. They hoard at first against the time of leisure, when they may perchance read and end by hoarding for the sake of hoarding, thus allying themselves with those dizzards who wallow among possessions which they cannot use, and who die before they have lived. To husband a favorite claret until the batch turns sour is not at all an artful stroke of policy, and how much more with a whole cellar. I writ, therefore, and busied myself in this playing labor, first for mine own advantage, therefore, that I might avoid the torpor of business and the atrophy of the sensibilities, which is the punishment of those who enslave themselves in affairs, and the next, odium in util verter negodium, to turn my leisure to good purpose. Silum et jucunda et idonea deservite lectorum del tanto simul atuc monendo. And unfortunately we have no translation there. At once to say both useful things and pleasant, to assemble these fond crotchets of philosophy, which I have lightened on in the highways and byways of books, so to please the reader, yet instruct, which, if it be granted possible, 'tis sufficient for my defense, and the sum of my argument, whatever else this treatise may contain or mean, is that books are for our enjoyment, and that pleasurable reading is the best prophylatic against bibliomania, and a sure salatum for their lovers. Yea, but you will infer that this is actum agere, an unnecessary work, full of vain repetition, the again and again, in other words, which I do not deny, for I confess I love to renew a pleasure by relating it. But since this conceit is so much mine own affair, you may well ask, to what purpose? To which, among other things which might be suggested, I ask, what is purpose? Many desirable things have no purpose whatsoever, and yet, if it is possible to distribute as well as augment a pleasure by relating it, I am acting in some purpose, for I bequeath to you the freedom of my enjoyment, without forcing its acceptance. Next, my work you think is superfluous, because many excellent bookmen, critics, commentators, bibliographers, etc., have written just volumes and elaborate tracts of this bibliomania. No news here. You may infer again that which I have in great measure is stolen from others. I admit it. Dicte mihi meha pagina fere. And we have a translation in the footnote. And my page says to me, you are a thief. But if the severe doom of Cineas be true, that it is a greater offense to steal dead men's labors than their clothes, what shall become of most writers? I hold up my hand at the bar amongst others, including my good master, for although I have not privily rifled, I am addicted to larceny in this kind, as I shall anon explain. Habs confidium reum, I plead guilty. I am content to be condemned with the rest. But why, it may still be urged, swell farther this welter of repetition, and worse, if all that they say of plagiary is true, and if indeed I have done no more than echo and pilfer, actum et demi, it is all up with me, I am undone, to which implications 'twere enough to say, ad abusi ad usum, non velle consequenta, the abuse of anything is no argument against its proper truth. But I have attempted something more particularly, and claim propriety in my method and fair usage. Were it otherwise, it might have been charged against me, that I have writ out of an incontinent penmanship, an itching humour which is common enough in this scribbling age, and most ages, as the authorities agree, are no better, so that oftentimes it falls out, as Robert Burton taxed of old. A new book is no more than some bauble or toy which idle fellows write, for, as idle fellows read, I have no wish to row in that galley, though I despise not idleness when I can get it, nor idle reading either, which hath its place with the rest in virtu multi essensus. There are no degrees in virtue as in vice. That there is a vast chaos and confusion of books I have no doubt, and that our eyes ache with reading, our fingers with turning, I do not deny. Nor can I deny that I have risked censure by becoming one of the mob of producers. I do not deny it, and I have only this to say for myself, as Burton said of his book, omne memum nihil memum. Sorry for that horrific pronunciation. Do we have a footnote? No, we do not have a footnote for that phrase. 'Tis all mine and none mine. As a bee gathers wax and honey out of many flowers and makes a new bundle of all, floriferius ut apes in saltibus omnia libant. And that is a phrase attributed to Lucretius. I was ever wont to intermix with mine own work some ornaments from the works of others, and I have laboriously collected his fardel out of diverse writers, and like him, sine injuria, I have wronged no writers, but given every man his due, and thus citing and quoting mine authors, I am no thief, sumpsi non surapi, I have taken, not stolen, and what Varro speaks of bees, minime malefice quad nullius opus vilcantes facreant deterrus, that they are not malicious because they cause no injury to the flowers, which they rifle. On the contrary, they give more than they take. I can say of myself, whom have I injured? It would be as untrue to say of me as Montaigne alleged might be said of him, that here I have not gathered a nosegay of strange flowers, and have put nothing of mine into it, but the thread to bind them. The matter is theirs, most parts, and yet mine, and in some instances, especially of Bibliomania proper, more mine than theirs. For the best of them are, as the saying is, at sea with that subject. I have tried to bring them safely into port, and if among so many borrowings I have been pleased to filch some, I have disguised and altered them to a new service, as Ragnar Osberg, if I may compare my small building with his, plundered the architectural notions of all times and wove them into the fabric of that inimitable pastiche, the status of Stockholm. So I pick and choose, and quisquid benedictum a ab ulo menum est, is a quote from Seneca. Whatever has been well said by anyone is my property. But as nature doth the ailment of our bodies incorporate, digest, assimilate, concio quad hausi, I dispose of what I take, and such kind of borrowing, as Milton holds, cannot be accounted a plagiary. So, if I make them pay tribute to set this out, my Macronicon, yet credit to the artist will accrue, who in known things still makes the appearance new. For, as Goethe holds, and I go some of the way with him, the best sign of originality lies in taking up a subject and then developing it so fully as to make everyone confess that he would hardly have found so much in it. The theory, at least, is mine, and the choice and arrangement of my collectia of shreds and patches. I make no excuse, qui s'excuse s'accuse, and if this new farrago in an ancient manner is condemned because there were giants of old in history and bibliography, then I say with Didacus Stella, Pygmae giganteum humoris, impositi plus quam ipsi, giante vivent. Our footnote is saying in Lucen, a dwarf standing on the shoulders of a giant may see farther than a giant himself. So I may likely adopt, adapt, improve, as our Prince of Wales advises, and also see farther than my predecessors. Were it otherwise, it may well be this method is not defenseless. For as Pliny saith, alienis pedibius ambulamus, alienis oculus agnosibus, anelia memoria saltumas, alinea opera vivimus. And our footnote is saying that is once again from Pliny's Histories, and it translates to, we walk with the feet of others, see a friend through another's eyes, salute him by another recalling his name, live by the work of others. For if you believe the relation of that shrewd man, Samuel Butler, all things which come to much, whether they be books, buildings, pictures, music, or living beings, are suggested by others of their own kind. This supposal may give a fairer and more probable account of some of my actions. It is no greater prejudice for me to indite after Burton than for him after others, and if he hath rescued many a passage from the oblivion of a prosaic environment by giving it a witty setting, so may the dry bones of such of my authorities as have hitherto slumbered in their own limbo awake to significance, and perchance to distinction, for I wish them no harm, from the new context, whether witty or not, and distinguished companions I have given them. Nor perhaps ought I to omit this other argument that I have resolved into my theme, many of those clear circumstances of fact which we find in well-attested and confirmed relations of this kind. And I here avow that I have been scrupulous to observe the rights of mine authorities in full propriety, citing with precision, so far as I could, their own words, not only in matter, but in form, out of a confessed regard for them, as Faverinus implied when he said, Si ex Platonis oration verbum aliquoid demas mutavis atqui id commodatissima facies de eleganta tamen dextris, si ex lycée de Sentia. And our footnote says Louis Gellius is the source there. No altering Plato, however skillfully, without disfiguring his style, nor Lysias without obscuring his sense. I know nothing, therefore, to help me imagine that I have wronged anyone purposefully. If then, as Donne feared for his Biathantos in multiplicity of not necessary citations, there appear vanity or ostentation or digression, my honesty must make an excuse and compensation. I am not only with Pliny, where he says that to choose rather than to be taken in a theft, than to give a man his due. Pliny says where he said, that didn't sound right. I am not only with Pliny, where he says that to choose rather to be taken in a theft than to give every man his due is obnoxi, animi, et felicius ingeni, but can say again with Donne that every branch which is excerpted from other authors and engrafted here is not written for the reader's faith, but for illustration and comparison. I solve it thus, and the conclusion from all of these premises is, I hope, sufficiently demonstrated. For the rest, Dicata alia est, the die is cast, and you must take it or leave it. As for those other faults of style, manner as distinct from matter and method, I am exposed to attack on all fronts, and most by comparison. I have missed my mark, fallen short, o'ershot it, Burton here, vulgarized him there, and deluded him too often. I am barbaric, unscholarly, provincial, amateurish, sentimental, glib, garrulous, what you will, a dealer in tautologies, rhetoric, gusto, purple patches, rhapsodies, cliches, vogue words, rags gathered together from several dunghills, excrements of authors, toys and fopperies, confusedly tumbled out, as he said of his own book, without art, invention, judgment, wit, learning, harsh, raw, rude, fantastical, absurd, insolent, indiscreet, ill-composed, indigested, vain, scurril, idle, dull, and dry. And with him I confess all. Few writers are more frequent in this kind of mischief. Thou canst not think worse of my performance than I do myself, for in the first place, I have my vision of what it might have been, and in the second, any work of this kind must remain an effort rather than an achievement, and in that alone I am belike overbold in advancing it. But thou canst still say 'tis not worth reading, to which I reply again briefly, and yet I hope sufficiently. The choice is thine, and if it be as bad as I have said, I yield it. I desire thee not to waste time in perusing so vain a work. I should be peradventure loth myself to read myself, or thee so writing. But such arguers may please to consider that I have precedence. 'Tis not the first usurpation of an author's style and method. Others have done as much, and not always as frankly. But the theme is mine, the whole discourse being a kind of picture of mine own disposition. Well or ill, I have put myself upon the stage, and I must take all risks. I have laid myself open in this treatise, turned mine inside, or the bookish part of me outward. I shall be censured, I doubt not, for, to say the truth, with Erasmus, nihil morisis hominum judicis, they're not so peevish as men's judgments. Yet this is some comfort, ut palata sic judicia, our censors are as various as our palates. 'Tis with our judgments as our watches, none go just alike, yet each believes his own. And never were there two opinions in the world alike, no more than two hairs or two grains. Diversity is the most universal quality, and for every thought expressed there are many glosses and interpretations. Plotinus believes only in philosophers, Fenelon in saints, Pindar and Byron in poets. To the Platonists, all men who are not devoted to their shining abstractions are rats and mice. Pope and Swift describe mankind around them as monsters. Goethe and Schiller are scarcely more kind. I could name many more instances, but refrain lest it be thought that I am opposed to critics when, forsooth, I rejoice in them, and am so entertained, an observer of the varieties and inconsistencies of the human mind, that in the language of our own day I should with grave misgiving contemplate any attempt to rationalize it. I must confess, in an eclectic habit of mind, I, like my critics, assorted and unfortunate in this respect, for their variety has no end. There's some peculiar in each leaf and grain, some unmarked fiber, or some varying vein. Just a couple more pages, so we'll continue on, but I do need a sip of water. One likes this, another that. He respects matter, thou art wholly for style. He loves to be amused, entertained, thou to be informed, uplifted. He is for tradition, thou for what is modern. One will draw upon authority, another upon expedient. This one demands what is personal, that one what is impersonal. And so they go on. Quote, homines, tot sentiae, so many men, so many minds. That which thou condemnest, he commends. That which is more pleasing to one is americesium, most harsh to another. Scarce any conveyance so accurately penned by one which another will not find a crack in, or cavil at, and the meanest of them claw and prey upon one another, as so many ravenous birds. 'Tis a war of opinions which has fallen out among the writers of all ages. So how shall I make any way through such prickly quiddities, or hope to express myself to each man's humour and conceit, still less give satisfaction to all? I have not tried. Best leave such things to take their chance, for everything is desired according to our belief of its excellency. Where I incline, there I entertain myself, howsoever it be, and am carried away by mine own weight. I have implied as much several times, de gustibus non est disputandum, and when I have spread all my reasons out, it remains, and it must be plain to all perspicacious readers, that this treatise is writ for mine own exercise and satisfaction. I have made a recreation of a recreation, to please myself, not in vanity, but as a game is played. And if you like not my game, go play something else. I shall not be offended. As for the disciples of that malignant deity called criticism, whose existence I doubt, I fear neither them that are old and sour, nor those sucking critics who would fain be nibbling ere their teeth are come, and who mistake their own toy trumpet for the trombones of fame. But for those who are with me in this enterprise, kin to me in taste, and who judge not altogether by the measure of popular and customary opinion, I hope I have graduated in their favour by writing not only according to jus et norma loquendi, the law and correct uses of speech, but what is readable for a readable book is a fair island full of flowers, birds, and trees, whereof we should thank God of his good grace. Whether I have writ such a book, 'tis for my reader to pronounce, but that there are good things in it I am very apt to believe, and I add, out of apology of Isaac Walton for his trees of fishing, that he that likes not the discourse should like the pictures of the trout and other fish which I may commend, because they concern not myself. For I am a crow who have followed the many ploughs, a gatherer and a disposer of other men's stuff. I have trawled the seas of authorship, presumed to put my sickle in other men's corn. I have rifled gardens, picked pockets, dipped my bucket into friendly wells, charged my battery at others' dynamos, gone up and down the world of imagination, which without doubt can do wonderful things, and beget strange persuasions, climbed Parnassus, roamed round Helicon, stared at Olympus, looked through magic casements, opened on the foam of perilous seas and fairylands forlorn, hobnobbled with bards and philosophers by the proxy of many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore in the muse-discovered world of Island Fortunate, and gathered as I went rare thoughts and fine phrases, and words more sure and sweet than they love could not think, truth could not stay. I have perchance in some instances jumbled up many good things immethodically, but not always. There is order in my chaos, nor do I beg pardon for those wild parts, for unless you have chaos within, you cannot give birth to a dancing star. Greater men have failed. How then shall I, that am vic sombra tanti philosophi, hope always to please? No man so absolute, Erasmus holds, to satisfy all except antiquity, and not, as it is managed in this age, even that. 'Tis the common doom of all writers. I must, I say, abide it. I seek not applause enough. If my slight muse do please these curious days, yet I am not coy of appreciation neither. Laudatis abunde, non fastidis si tibi lector ero, which is a quote from Ovid. But praise enough if you, gentle reader, do not despise me. Greater praise if you enjoy my garden. A man is really alive only when he delights in the goodwill of others, which is a quote from Goethe. So whilst I fear the censure of wise men and respect their assessment of my labors, I scorn the rest, for it is better that a man is willing to be what he is quod sis est velis. What, therefore, I have said, pro tenute mea, which is translated to in my own poor fashion. What, therefore, I have said in my own poor fashion, I have said. One or two things I would say yet in anticipation of legitimate censure. I was desirous to have amended, if I could, concerning the matter or the manner of handling this my subject, to have polished and preened more, so that my style, which sometimes flows remissly, would have been better mirrored that of my master. But the least said of that, the soonest mended. I would also have added many more of these examples, aphorisms, stories, apogiems, etc., which are still roving free in the ocean of letters. But I was constrained to stop, for there is no end to the testimony of books, and at best I could do no more than hope that I had adequately represented my theme in this treatise, even though it be an inadequate gallantry, an incomplete and often tangled melody, for I am less maker of books than of anything else, hoping that you might buttress my edifice where it is frail from your own quarry. In brief, and to have done with explanations, I confess it is neither as I would nor as it should be. I would willingly add much, but 'tis too late. It was not in my power to end so large a subject, for I had done little more than advance upon its outposts, when time bid me stop. In the meantime I have gathered enough, and if my argument is not plain, no additions could have made it plainer. Last of all, and for a final apologia, in so writing, I give my belief that the proper study of mankind is books, which was supported by the learned Dr. Donne, when he claimed that the world is a great volume and man the index of that book. So, to cut the matter short, I presume of thy good favour and gracious acceptance, gentle reader, and out of an assured hope and confidence thereof, I will close this prolegomon and begin. And that is the end of our section titled Author to the Reader. And the incoming sections are much more bite-sized and suitable to shorter videos. So where are we at here? I've got a flap over my gracious. We are 52 minutes and 22 seconds. I think that's quite enough for the day.